Hi everyone, my name is Norman King, and welcome to the first episode of My Two Cents. For this episode, I'm dedicating the segment to an important conversation about Black Lives Matter and the ongoing issue of police brutality in America. All right, so joining the show today are my dear friends of mine from high school and from college. Joining me now is Sydney Jackson, Miss District of Columbia, Team USA 2020. Also joining me is Philip Keisler, who has campaigned for the Democratic Party. My longtime friend Kelsey Coleman, the activism chair at the University of Maryland's NAACP. Kelsey was also the interim campaign manager for Jan Lewis's DC at Large council campaign this year. Also joining us are my friends Thomas Tillman, Nyana Black, and Brandon Landy. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for coming and having this discussion with me. So, first of all, what's your first reaction to what's going on?
I'll start. Personally, it's just extremely upsetting, but it's something that, especially like those of us within the Black community, know that it's not something new. It's just being recorded. It's just far more easily to access. You know, these shootings, killings, all this brutality happening within our community. And it's something that I don't know, I've seen it before with my own eyes, before that it was popular to record it and post it online. It was something that you just kind of knew was happening. You didn't necessarily know there wasn't a way to stop it. And a lot of times it still feels like there isn't necessarily a way to stop it because the police force has been doing this since the police came into existence.
Right.
And I think that just now, because it's all over the internet, we all of a sudden have a way to stop it, which just isn't necessarily true. But yeah, it's a very upsetting and unsettling feeling to see it all play out and to see it become so normalized. All of a sudden, every time it happens, someone's sending you a video. Did you see this happen? Like, we shouldn't have to do that. It shouldn't be so normal to send a video around of someone getting shot. So, yeah.
To add on to what Sydney's saying about how painful it is to watch that, it's almost like they commodify Black grief. And so that's why I don't like watching the news, and especially when you see these things play out on the news, not to take away from anyone that's ever been victimized by police and the people that have been killed by police, but you see that it's typically cisgender Black men that they bring up on the news. I have not heard the news talk about Breonna Taylor in the same amount of times that they've talked about, George Floyd, and it's not even just about Black women that they're not talking about. They're most definitely not talking about Black trans people or Black queer people who are being killed every single day, even by people of our own community, and it's because it's a blatant disrespect, like how it is for racism, that you don't think that they're people either. And so you kind of lose hope, and that's why I try not to look at those videos, because it's just, I don't like looking at Black people getting killed. So it's not that I ignore it, but I don't like looking at those videos. But also watching it through the news, it's like you're not uplifting these intersectional Black people that are also facing this violence and facing it within the community itself. But yeah.
No, yeah, that's very true. I have to say that I haven't heard anything on the news regarding Black trans people whatsoever and regarding their deaths. What I have seen, though, is on social media of people saying the statistics of like how Black trans people are killed more often. And that's really sad, but we're not seeing that on mainstream media. We're not seeing it on CNN, we're not seeing it on MSNBC. We're only seeing it on like small posts on Instagram. But regarding social media, do you guys think that it's helpful for these times right now, or do you think that social media is kind of productive?
I think it can be really desensitizing, and when it becomes like like almost like trauma porn, where people are just seeing all these graphic and brutal images and videos, it's kind of like we no longer feel how we're supposed to feel about it, and we just kind of like, it's like you're supposed to build up an immunity, which is just so abnormal. I don't think it's healthy for us, but I do think that you can't ignore it. I feel like there needs to be some balance, but it's really hard when there's all these unchecked images and videos circulating around with like not much censorship or warnings. And I think that can be really, really toxic and harmful, especially for people within the Black community. Right. For people outside the Black community, it's distressing, but I feel like it's not nearly as traumatic and deeply unsettling. Yeah.
And just to add on to what Brennan's saying, I think also social media gives a lot of people the opportunity to do a lot of performative activism and feel good about themselves.
Right.
And post, like, there's a huge like Black Square movement where like it was like, I think, designed to like suppress actual like resources and voices that would actually help. And so I think that like it gives people a unique way to feel like they're doing something when they're actually not doing something. That doesn't mean they're like people who are posting like resources, like petitions, like people to call, like that stuff is all really important. Also like educational resources that like I think are really helpful to people who haven't always been exposed to like the information they should be. And so I think there's like a place for it for sure. But I think it's like important to like always ask yourself, like, am I posting this because like this will make me feel good, or am I posting this because I actually think it will help?
No, yeah, you were spot on, Philip, because the Black Square thing that you were talking about, when people were posting all those Black Squares, Blackout Tuesday, the petitions, the amount of Black Squares that were posted did not match the number of petitions that were supposed to be signed. There were more Black Squares posted. So you see there's a problem there. People are posting more to make themselves look good or to make themselves look cute. And a lot of these people, I have to say, happen to be white that are our age, unfortunately. But do you think that there's ways to, make social media activism more authentic in a way?
I don't think so personally, because for me, we all know social media isn't 100% authentic anyway. Like, we can all say we have our favorite influencers, like they posted a picture of themselves crying, or they talked about something big that happened to them. But going off of what you said about Black Tuesday, I saw more people post, oh my God, Chadwick Boseman, him passing away, than I did actually talking about Black lives and what's actually happening. And I can say, at least in our little bubble, because we all have gone through the Berk system, is I saw a lot of people in Berk who I think wanted to talk all this stuff while we were in high school, but when they're talking about what's actually affecting their peers right now, they were really quiet.
Right.
But they could post like in the last 2 days about Chadwick Boseman and his passing because he was a star, he was someone important, he fit the bill. In a sense of like that, for me, I don't think we can make social media more authentic until we as people become more authentic, especially because all of us grew up in the DMV. So for here, we're outspoken, we protest, we have all these opportunities, but then now we're all spread out around the country, and those opportunities, at least for me, I feel like lots of our peers who went to our high school didn't use them the same way.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like one of the main problems with social media is it's become a lot like news media. It's all about sensationalizing lives and trying to get more clicks. That's really what people after. They're after likes. They're not really after a movement a lot of the time, man. They want to be seen in a certain light rather than just going on the ground really and fighting for the movement they're posting about. It's easy activism, it's easy likes, it's easy popularity really, and that's where it gets lost.
Yeah, I agree. I feel as though, especially in June, where there was, like the breakout of protests after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor's murders, I saw a lot of people just even on the streets protesting, because I think I don't know if all of us went out there and protested, but like I personally went out every day for like that a week and a half. I had to finish like the end of the week and not protest because I was burnt out. But I just saw so many people have these like super extravagant signs and like pose and take pictures with them, and then check all the pictures, take them again, check them again to make sure they had the right picture. And to me, it's like, but did you feel anything when you were making that sign? Did you care about what that sign was supposed to represent while you were marching down the street? Did you actually march? Did you cry? Did you care about the cause, or did you just want Instagram likes? And some people even spelled Breonna Taylor's name wrong. And I'm like, what in your mind made you come out and do all of this, but not care about the cause at all? And I just feel as though, like, of course, we know social media is not completely authentic for the most part at all. And it really just gives people the false perception of caring about a cause that's so deep and personal to so many people, when they really don't. Again, like the Black Squares, your posters, your videos of protesting, while other people are marching down the streets crying, just with something of a cardboard box that they found in their trash because they just wanted to make sure that they were properly a part of the protest, while other people make a mockery of it. It's really hard to differentiate one from the other because the person with the most beautiful, extravagant sign who went to take a picture has a whole following of other people who just want to see that on their timeline.
Exactly.
Not, the videos of the speeches of the victims and their families. You know what I mean? It's really hard to find the right resources a lot of
I
times.
get exactly what you're saying, because like I'm admitting one more person. Elia is coming on right now, so she'll have more to contribute to this conversation. And her sister is also going to be joining us right now, Chloe Baker and Elia Baker, longtime friends of mine. Elia also went to our school, Edmund Brooke School. But regarding the police and racial bias, what are some conversations that you guys have had with your parents?
I don't know. The scary one for me is the fact that I have little siblings. So I'm 19. My brother's 4, my sister's 6. They'll both be 5 and 7 in the next month. So through all the social media, my sister has got obsessed with TikTok. And one day she got deep into it, and all she saw was George Floyd's name. And as a 6-year-old, wouldn't you be confused? You didn't know what's going on. You don't know what's happening.
Right.
The conversation I've been having with my parents recently is how to have that conversation with a 6-year-old who's wondering what's all this, for a lack of a better word, trauma porn that she's seeing on the social media app that she's usually watching all the white boys dance. So for her, it was this whole thing of like when she got deep onto the phone, because she's a 6-year-old, she doesn't know any better. She was just looking for more dance videos. When she got to this point of seeing people that look like her get hurt, she was confused.
Right.
So we talked about it. We had like a week-long conversation during all of the big protests that happened here. And throughout that last of it, she pulled me aside and asked me, should she be scared of the police? And I just didn't even know what to say, because I was like, on one hand, I'm like, no, but on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know how to explain this. And like I talked about it with my parents, and it was just like this mom side of like no one had a legit answer. And the fact that I couldn't have an answer kind of broke me a little bit. It was this moment of like, here's my sister who, my mom, she's surrounded by books that look like her, by girls that look like her. I make sure all of my friends who are on some of this look like her, so she feels great about that. And here she is confused whether she should be scared of the police, who for her, she high fives them, she says hello, she asks about their day, and now she doesn't know what to say.
That's heartbreaking. Oh my God. That is really hard. That's really hard to hear, like for a little child to see that. And on TikTok, we're supposed to be using social media for positive things. Do you think that, because I've been seeing like a lot of memes going out lately, about police brutality and Karens and stuff like that. Do you guys think that like humor is a good way to cope with what's going on?
Like with everything we're going through, yeah, we gotta laugh sometimes. And if it means laughing at white people, no offense, that's fine. That's fine, and not like every white person, but like white people that are racist in general,
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. I have been laughing at a lot of the memes, especially the Karen memes, because it's so relatable, I think, when like you see something that's that you've gone through in your life, if you've been like approached by like a racist teacher, if you've been approached by a Karen, because there are a lot of them out here, especially where we live. So I think that seeing that on social media, it kind of brings comfort to our generation Z. I'm trying to say.
One of the side effects of the Karen memes that I've been discovering recently is I've been identifying a lot of my previous teachers from Burke as like Karen type people, like people that would just be like, wow, like you've been moderating this whole classroom for as long as we've been here. Like, wow. Like, I don't know. In some ways, looking at these in like a comedic way has been making some sense of things that I hadn't been able to think about better in the past. But yeah, there's definitely also some really negative aspects of humor in regards to desensitizing things, like that TikTok dance, the Arrest the Killers of Breonna Taylor, where people were dancing to it on TikTok. You remember, like that was like white kids would dance to it and make their own things, and I was just like, wow, this is like, imagine the people watching this that are like at the protests, and like I don't know, it just can also truly be like toxic and terrible.
Right. I myself, I'm not really seeing everything because like I don't have TikTok. I have Instagram and everything else. But for some reason, I chose not to download TikTok. And you will see some TikTok videos on Instagram, but I'm not seeing everything that's being posted on there. I've heard that some conservative people are also using TikTok to like benefit their own cause. I know that Trump supporters are also doing that because everyone's using social media to like talk about their truth or what they believe is true. So I feel like, yeah, it can go both ways. But what I want to talk about, these questions I want to direct to the Black teenagers, Black young adults. Did you guys feel hesitant to start driving or to get your license?
So out of everyone here, probably say for Kelsey, I don't know if she started, but I drove last. I'm 19. Thomas is on this call too. He's how I got to school. So I was like, I have someone who I know will safely get me to school. So I didn't start driving for the sheer fact of, one, when I was like 11, had a really bad run-in with the police with my dad. So I was like, no, I'm good. And two is the fact that, like, for me, I have anxiety. So the fact of being in a car is really scary. But the thought that now where I live in is a different place from when I would have started driving, had I started driving at the 15 and 9 months, I moved from a very, let's just for lack of a better word, ghetto neighborhood to a more, I want to say, prosperous one. So where I would have started driving was a scary place anyway, where you heard gunshots and all the other stuff. So for me, it was like, I'm not getting on the road for what? I'd rather pay for an Uber or something like that. At least then I can share it with my parents and have them track where I'm going. And like, I'm not going far. And like, yeah, it's more expensive, but for me, I'm 6 foot, but I'm also not trying to get attacked by anyone, let alone someone who's supposed to help me. And sure, then it's not as prevalent on social media with the Black Lives Matter movement as it is now. But then we still had, at least in our school, that movement didn't stop after Trayvon Martin was killed. If anything, it got more prevalent, at least for our community. So for me, I was like, I'm not getting behind the wheel. And even now that I'm like, I'm about to get my full, I'm still kind of hesitant. But at least now I'm like, I'm educated, I know my rights and all that other stuff. So no one's going to try me, hopefully. But because we live where we live, but we also have bad acts of brutality where we live. And we live in a better place than some places in America.
Absolutely correct. That's what I was going to get to my other question about. Do you guys think that police brutality differs in like different regions in the United States? Because we're in the Washington, D.C. area. So some areas are different, different neighborhoods. But I know that like in the South or in the Midwest, it might be different. Or in like New York, where stop and frisk was a big thing. What do you guys feel about that?
Yes and no. I think like police brutality looks the same in a way that like police brutality isn't always just like stopping people, but it's also like putting so much money into the police, and most of like the city council funding being a part of the police rather than other services that can help people, prosper and invest in people instead of investing in property. But when it comes to like stop and frisk and stuff like that, I do think it looks different in different places, like in highly gentrified places. Like it's like comparing Boston and DC to like Mobile,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, people are like, like we're not in the South, so it's not super racist. No, it just looks different and it manifests. There's probably like more stop and frisk in Mobile than there is in like Boston, but it's still racism, and it's just like diet racism, or I'm gonna take your house and you have to move to this like other area, Also, it depends on the time period. Like, even though like I can't speak for everyone, but I live in Prince George's County, which is a predominantly Black community.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it was like very over policed for a very long time, and it wasn't until recently that stopped happening. Also with DC when it was like Chocolate City, which is another problem. But yeah.
Right.
I think a big part of it is the culture of policing in America. It's a culture where there's a certain group of people who have total and complete faith that the police are there to do their job. Then there's other segments of America who have almost no faith. And it's something almost universal for Black Americans not to have faith in the police department, whether you're in Alabama or New York or DC. Prince George's County, in February of last year, I think this never hit the national news, but I remember reading about it. A cop in Temple Hills had arrested a Black man, and this is a Black cop, and he shot him in the back of his car 11 times while he was handcuffed in the back of his squad car. So it happens in PG County. It might not hit the news. The story might not be as sensational as others. And you'll have the same things happening in Alabama. The only reason we really got George Floyd was because of the video and the brutality witnessed in the video. And it's because we saw the video, not because the police saw the video, you know? So it's a nationwide problem, and it's a culture that definitely needs to change.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because like I was thinking, thank God for, you know, smartphones, because if we didn't have the smartphones or the technology that we have now, we probably wouldn't know about what happened to George Floyd. We probably wouldn't know about Breonna Taylor. We probably wouldn't know about a lot of things that happened. And there are probably still cases that didn't even get caught on camera. That's the thing. So there's a lot of things that we don't know. So if these are the ones that we caught, how many more do you think there are? They're probably like, I don't know.
There's definitely so much more that we obviously don't know, especially because within the Black community, policing and calling the police isn't, you know, for our own safety. If someone says they're going to call the police on you, that's like a threat. Like, oh, you're going to call the police on me. Now the situation is like completely out of my hands, out of my control. I don't know if I'll make it out of that situation or not. Whereas, you know, a white American says they're going to call the police so that they feel safer, so that they feel more secure in whatever situation they're in. And in terms of that, you know, the police line is going off all the time. You have absolutely no idea how many people are experiencing police brutality who don't have necessarily the means or the communication abilities to post it or record it, or it's just so normalized, it's not something out of the ordinary. You know, like George Floyd, those people passing by, that was out of the ordinary to see someone harassing. I mean, not necessarily out of the ordinary, but I think the way in which he was killed, to see that type of mannerism on him was very much out of the ordinary, and it was something that they knew, okay, we need to record this. And other places, such as where we live in Southeast, they're not recording it, posting it on IG so that it gets big. It's just happening, you know what I mean? It's everyday life. So
and just building on to what Sunita was saying, I think in addition to like the physical violence, when you're over policing predominantly Black neighborhoods, like that does mean also like who are you giving tickets to? Who are you going to end up arresting? Like that does create a disproportionate impact financially as well when you're ticketing only Black communities. And so it's not just physical violence, also like economic violence, I think, as well.
Do you feel like that you guys have gotten a proper education about racial injustice in school, though, in college or in high school?
I can say yes in college because I go to a HBCU, so it's all Black everything all day, which I think also speaks to the fact of like where we went to high school. And like for me, not saying I didn't like our high school and it didn't have its great things, but for me it was like I gotta get out. Like I can't be surrounded by all people who don't look like me for another 4 years, especially learning. Doing engineering. For me, that's difficult, and I wanted to learn from people that look like me. Yeah. So that's what I chose. So I feel like it's not that our education was bad, it's that there was so much more we didn't know. But I also feel kind of bad saying that because I also know where we went to school, we were privileged for what we even had. So the people comparisons who were in public school or charter school or just not in school in the metropolitan area we live. So it's like this two front of saying like, I know there was more, but I also can't erase that I know I got a lot more also at the same time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I feel as though I did learn significantly more about African American culture, Black culture, African culture from Burke. I think one thing that I wish I had learned was I learned that from a Black teacher. I learned all of that from white female teachers. And to be completely honest, it didn't diminish my experience or anything, but it definitely didn't give me the right type of setup going into the real world and interacting with other Black people that didn't have the same type of education as I did and didn't understand where I was coming from. And then I think about it myself and I'm like, I'm coming from a standpoint of a white female teacher who taught me this, not a Black teacher, not someone who really did the work, who lived and experienced this and learned it to better understand their identity so that I could understand mine. You know what I mean? So I learned a lot of that because I took a gap year, so I haven't been in college yet. And then I think about going into college, and I think most of my professors are also going to be white again. And I'm going to be learning that again from white professors, and then it puts it more pressure on me personally to do the work myself. I have to read, books by Black authors. I have to watch TED Talks. I have to watch interviews. I have to watch documentaries by Black people for Black people to learn that myself. And of course, we received an incredible education, and I learned a lot more about my identity than my friends who went to public school or other PWIs where they didn't value multiculturalism. But again, like, my identity wasn't really taught to me properly by a Black teacher, which I wish it was.
Right. That's where it starts. I think the issue is we need to have more Black teachers that we can, relate that can relate to students of color. So that way, like, they feel like they're more welcome. Brenton, you had something to say.
I was going to say, to be quite honest, from my perspective as a white boy that went to Burke, I do not think I learned nearly as much as I should have about Black history. I left Burke and going into college, learning about these things like eugenics and forced sterilizations and Black Wall Street and like all these things that had happened that I hadn't heard about once at Burke. And I was like, wow. And they were like, they praise themselves for being like, we teach about indigenous history, and like, okay, they have some aspects, but it's pretty much oftentimes it has been from like a white savior point of view, like the Pine Ridge trips, going there and like, here's our helping hands, we're going to help these people because this is what we do. And it's like, okay, are you teaching us from the savior perspective or from the co-conspirator perspective? Because they weren't, and that's what they need to do a little more.
You definitely learned a lot of Burke, but there are still things that we could have learned. And as someone who was in Prince George's County public schools for a long time, it was definitely a difference. And even being in a Black county, I didn't even learn my history being in a Black county. I learned it at a white school, which is crazy, And when I started going to UMD, it's like the classes, my professor for history, and the course was like pre-colonial history to 1877, which is pretty much just indigenous genocide and slavery in American history, right? And it was taught by a white man, and I was like, I already know this about to be. But he taught me stuff I didn't even know about, like the Revolutionary War and stuff, and that was great.
Right.
But every other class was like, well, first of all, I would have loved if we had a Black professor for that class. But like in the discussion sections, we would like dissect the work and be like, is this good or bad? What's the gray area in it? And looking at the Constitution, comparing a patriot's history to a people's history. And some of it, a lot of history is not so black and white, but some things are, racism, saying it's good or bad, that's pretty black and white, and most of the students, they were just like, a patriot's history is a real history. This thing, learning about indigenous genocide and slavery, all of that stuff is optional and you can learn it on your own time. But what we should be praising is how brave Columbus was and stuff like that. It's just like, where did you come from? Like,
right.
Where are you learning these things, and why are you not listening to the professor? And it's like, if a Black person now teaches this, then they start questioning the Black teacher because they're just making it about race.
Right.
But then if they hear it from a white person, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. I never learned about it from that perspective. I mean, I remember I had to write a paper about like something I was passionate about, and I wrote about generational trauma. And he said, don't even use citations or anything. But I was like, I'm not going to do that because he's going to argue with me. So I had footnotes for like everything. I had sources that, I'm not making this stuff up. And then my white professor, he comes and tells me that generational trauma doesn't exist because he has Black friends that aren't crying about slavery, and it's like, what are we doing right now? What are we doing? Like, why? Why is this happening? Why are these people allowed to teach? Like, this shouldn't be happening at the collegiate level. This shouldn't be happening at any level, especially not at a PhD or like undergraduate level. Like, this is very irresponsible teaching, especially if it's about American history. So, yeah.
That's a shame that's happening at like in a university level, that kind of level. That should not be happening. You're right. And have you guys ever felt like you had to be in a situation where you had to correct a teacher or a peer during class time hours? Do you guys have any experiences with that?
History with CJ. I'm not going to name drop him, but we all know who I'm talking about. Like, just my problems with him in the sense of like, what, my section was like me and 2 other Black kids. So like, it happens. But also the fact that like for a while, he's who led the Black History Assembly at Burke, which for me was this big disconnect because it wasn't like he wasn't passionate. It wasn't like he didn't care. It wasn't like he wasn't coming from the right place in his heart. But when Brendan, you started talking, it made me think of it. We did learn from a white savior perspective. Like it didn't even connect until you said that. And then I'm thinking back to him and his classes, like his heart was always in the right place, but it doesn't make it right. Which I think is another thing of thinking about, like not even like a certain class or like that, just his whole experience as a teacher at Burke for me doesn't truly sit right with me because my mom's in education, so I got high standards for teachers, and I only got a couple teachers that fit it from our school at least. So for me, it's like thinking back to like how everyone loved him and he was so sensationalized as just a person, but no one cared to really look at him as a teacher.
That's the thing. So like, you were like one of the few Black kids in that class. Have you guys ever felt alone as a Black person being in school, or alone in any situation? Because I know I certainly have felt alone.
When I was doing my police brutality campaign, I had a lot of pushback from it because they didn't want me to talk about that. It was too taboo, it was too political. But it had been going on in the news for 2 weeks. I waited until people were a little bit more informed before I spoke about it. And the people who, run my social media were saying that, that I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't, I shouldn't be posting about it. And I felt so alone being a Black title holder in a system of pretty much that was made for white women and girls, and talking about police brutality and being on these phone calls with white adults who were from the South telling me, well, I don't know about police brutality and I don't see it. And so I just don't really think that this is really happening for you to be talking about on such a level. And I was like, have you watched the news? And I sent them a script. I sent them all of these writings and research that I did so that they would understand, as if I had to prove that police brutality was happening. Like they wouldn't just believe that this was real.
Right.
And they're like, well, I've never heard it. And they got everybody's name wrong, all of the victims' names wrong on this phone call. And it made me feel so alone in that situation where I'm fighting to talk about something that I shouldn't have to fight for, that I shouldn't even have to talk about. They should have brought it to me. We want you to talk about this.
Yeah.
And it just made me feel so alone for so long. Like the entire time that I was protesting and speaking about it, I just felt like I had virtually no real support until it became a much bigger ordeal. I guess that it started showing on their news outlets and the way that their social medias. So until it came across to them, it wasn't important that I wanted to talk about it. So yeah.
No, yeah, thank you, Sydney. So do you think that right now this country is in a divide, a political divide?
I'm stuck right now because the DNC and the RNC both were absolute disasters, and neither group gave Black people any reason to go out and vote for them. It's simple as that. All of the virtue signaling by the DNC was specifically targeted at making white suburban people comfortable voting Democrat. And the Republicans, even though they had those gun-toting people, they were still trying to virtue signal, like say, hey, Trump has a Black friend. They had the guy from the NFL come out and say, well, Trump's not a racist. Obviously, I'm friends with him. It's not that simple. Biden has worked with segregationists in the past in order to attain political capital. And Trump has denied Black people to be able to move into his hotel. I can't on good consciousness say that I am confident in America after this election with either candidate. And Ice Cube said it, I'm gonna need more from Biden, or even if Trump can do something, I'm gonna need more from him, either one of them, to just do more for Black people. I'm that desperate right now, so.
There are some that are saying that this election is life or death, and that we just need the lesser of two evils. So we need to compromise. What do you say to someone that's saying that we just need to get someone in there that's Democratic? We just need someone in the White House that's not Trump.
I mean, I think I somewhat agree with it, but just because you vote for someone doesn't mean that that's like the best investment of your time to I think this is what Kelsey and Thomas were saying, was that I think that I'm voting for Joe Biden, holding my nose and doing it, but the idea that you put all your faith in like this president is going to save me. And I think that that's kind of what a lot of politics is focused on, because it's so focused on this presidential race. And I think our generation overall, like we come out to vote every 4 years and that's about it. But we don't focus on like the primaries. Those like Thomas was talking a lot about, like in my district in Missouri, we just elected Cori Bush, and like that is like huge. The first real like Black Lives Matter activist to go to Congress, and that's huge to push a future administration in the right direction. So I think that like elections are not half, but a part of the equation, because you can't like someone like Trump isn't going to listen to anything we say, and like Biden is going to listen to like a marginal amount. But like I don't know, I think that the question is like, how do we mobilize not just in the presidential level, like local level, and then also create like important like action in our communities, like mutual aid funds, things like that, that really can take some of the power away from our politicians and put them in our own community's hands.
Mm-hmm. I think those are some great points. I definitely agree with what you say. But then also like in the same conversation, it's like we need to have the understanding that democracy isn't for everyone. It's not for the people, because it doesn't support the minority. You know, the minority is the people. It's what supports the people, minorities, and they're the ones most left out by democracy, because it's the majority rules. You know, it's not inclusive of everyone, or at least our democracy, right? So I feel like while, you know, it's important to vote if you feel like voting and get Biden, Kamala Harris in there, there's still like, it's not, we need to understand that it's not fixing anything long term, and you've got to make more than just voting and telling other people to vote your goal, because that's not going to do anything. It's just going to hurt more people if you say this is going to change and then it doesn't. And they're like, okay, where are we now? You said things were going to be better.
Right. Because people got these politicians have to keep their promises of what they're saying. That's the thing. But Thomas, we have to add to that.
I think it's important also to look at policy with these politicians. I think one of the most important things, not just to the Black community, but to all working Americans, is we need universal health care. And we need politicians that will fight for that. Because right now you're seeing in a pandemic, it's disproportionately killing Black people, because Black people disproportionately can't afford private health care. Mm-hmm. So we need universal health care. And we also need criminal justice reform, removal of for-profit prisons. And we can't keep that. What's the amendment to the 13th Amendment that says prisoners can be slaves, essentially? We need a politician who will take that out. And Biden wrote the crime bill. Trump did release his Step 1 Act for criminal justice reform, but then he also goes and says, I'm the law and order president. Right. So there's too many contradictions with both of them for me to have faith.
Racism didn't start when Trump became president, right? It started at the foundation of this country. So he is not the central issue. You need to center Black people, not racism. And that's something that I've learned over the course of like this academic school year, is that I cannot center racism anymore. I have to center my own liberation, because if I'm only centering white supremacy, that my mental health is going to decline. I'm going to lose my mind, and I'm going to become trigger warning suicidal, because I did, you know, and I have to start centering myself. We cannot center these white people and these white politicians and these fake politicians that are going to say that they're going to do things for us. We have to take matters into our own hands. So that's how I feel about the situation.
That's another note. I'm going to get back to what your note about mental health later again, because that's really important to talk about. But back to the system. Yes, the system has to be changed, and especially the police system, because actually what I found out with my own research, according to the NAACP, the modern day police actually formed from slave patrols of the 1700s from the Carolinas. What can we do as young Black teenagers, not even young Black teenagers, but as young people in general? How can we help each other with mental health during these times? Because I know that during quarantine and seeing these protests in the news, it can be traumatizing. So how can we help each other, and what can we do to cope with what's going on?
Talk to people who understand you. So surrounding yourself with people who are going to understand what's going on and who are going to not alienate you for your emotions, because that can be really frustrating to be told that your feelings aren't valid on a topic that you've been thinking a lot about and that really affects you. You need to be able to talk to someone who's going to validate you.
Yeah, also just checking up on your friends. Like, I know a lot of my friends are going through, you know, the emotions of it a lot harder than I am. A lot of them have a lot of different, you don't know what people have experienced, you know, within their lifetime. You may see them at school, or we may have went to the same very privileged school and they went home and experienced something completely different than what you thought they were experiencing. So I think just if you have Black people in your circle, check up on them. And also, I think to diversify your friend groups, because especially for those of us who aren't within the Black community, it'll help you better understand their experience to the best degree that you possibly can, just to diversify, just to hear their stories, just to check up on them. I really, really appreciate when people check up on me, because sometimes I don't think I even need to be checked up on. But when someone's like, hey, how are you doing? Like, you know, have you started journaling? Some of my friends say start journaling. Have you journaled? You know, have you taken a break from looking at the news? Have you taken a social media break? And I'm like, I haven't. And I think I will now. So, yeah.
I think it's also to remember, as a white person checking up on any of your friends of color, particularly your Black friends, is to remember not to kind of push things too much, and remember to let them share what they're willing to share, because then it can border on like asking people to share their trauma when they're not, like, you know, something that they don't want to do. It's just important to remember to let someone share what they want to share.
Reparations, that's all I gotta say. Like, that monetary reparations, y'all don't understand, that comes in clutch when y'all like add money into my Venmo. That helps me pay for therapy so I can deal with this stuff, you know, because it's like racism literally kills people because it's stressful, you know. It's not just dying from like being killed by police. Like, it is stressful and it harms your mental and physical health. Like, what I've been explaining, I'm pretty sure it's all stress related, because the doctors can't figure out what's wrong with me. I haven't been able to go to sleep because I haven't been able to breathe for the past 5 weeks. My spinal cord has like been paralyzed me, like, and stuff like that. And it's just because I've been working on this stuff like every single day. Like, the amount of trauma that I experienced at my PWI, and just like what's going on right now. Like, when y'all add somebody into my Venmo account, that really like helps. And I'm not like trying to exploit nobody, but like helping people's GoFundMe pages and stuff like that, that really helps people like survive and live, you know? Stuff is really helpful.
Well, I want to ask you guys now, you guys have gone protesting. Have you? Most of you have gone protesting. Not all of you, but I assume that some of you have. So, what are your experiences protesting in the city?
So going to protests most like days of the week, it's been pretty difficult because a lot of people don't show up. So the best thing to do is go in a group, because having allies there, or just people that will protect you, is great. Like for example, this one time the police were kettling us and they're trying to run their bikes into us. And my friends like had to pull me away so that I don't get in with the action. And I just think that's really important to do with your friends, and make sure that you have people that protect you and that have your best interests in heart.
And at a protest, especially for safety reasons, you just need to keep an eye out for each other. That's the most important thing. Just keep your eyes out, keep your eyes peeled, look around, make sure you're completely aware of your surroundings at all times. Where are the cops? Where are the white people? Where are the Black people? Who looks kind of sus? Who do you want to just keep yourself nearby? Just, you know, just be safe.
I would say, I don't know if they're still doing this, but I was always wearing sunglasses just because I kept getting pepper sprayed. I was always wearing like pants. I didn't really have my legs out just because they were shooting rubber bullets and things. I don't know if they still do that, but just be careful, because they will do something super random out of the ordinary. And yeah, always go in a group. Always, honestly, if you're a person of color, always stay a little closer to the other white people protesting, because it's so crazy how in this climate, when you're protesting, the police come at you as a Black person, and white people will jump in front of you because they know they're not going to hurt them, and they literally don't. Like, it's so crazy to just watch that happen. So yeah, always check for the white people. Always know what the people in your group are wearing, and have each other's locations, because a lot of the times they literally cut the power or like the connections off where they know people are going to be protesting, and you won't be able to be in contact with anybody. So yeah, I would say that's a super safety tip. And also always update your parents or somebody who's not protesting about where you are, because a lot of the times my friends would be on Twitter getting like constant updates about where the police were coming, where people were getting arrested. Just have someone who's not there with you giving you updates.
Also, I think as well, you can write your emergency contact on your arm as well, just in case something really bad happens. The other people around you know who to call. I think also, like, in time of COVID, it's incredibly important to go with masks as well. And I think that I think that it's great to go out and protest as well, but I think that if some people don't feel comfortable at this time doing that, there's like other ways to like make sure you're helping protest as well by like bringing water, bringing like sunscreen, bringing a lot of materials, extra masks and like that to help protests go forward. And also like if you don't feel comfortable in crowds, like going on like a street corner and like showing solidarity in that way is another way that you're not part of a giant crowd, but you're still helping spread the message, which is important as well.
Yeah, and pay people, if you're not protesting, especially if you're white or a non-black person of color and you're not protesting, pay the people that are protesting and pay for their supplies, pay for their materials, give them ways to, pay for transportation. Like if you're not there, you need to be supporting in some way and like showing them I'm not just going to share petitions. Like, because if you just share a petition, that's like longer term stuff, right? You need to be there in the short term because other people are doing things in the immediate short term, right? So be there for them, be there for those people if you can't be one of them.
I think it's really important that you pay people and get people resources that choose to go in person and vote. Like I may feel my kind of way about voting, but like everyone should at least have the option of doing it if they want to do it. And a lot of people don't trust the mail-in system right now because of like, the Postmaster General and Trump. And a lot of people I know are gonna go in person and vote. And what we're trying to do with the NAACP at least is like raise a GoFundMe so we can buy masks, hand sanitizer, and gloves for people that have to go in person. Because most times those people are like more at-risk people and people that live in like low-income community neighborhoods and have like jobs that don't afford them the right to like, print something out at home. So like, I mean, it's really important to pay people to put themselves at risk of being in like coronavirus stuff. So yeah.
At these protests, like what age group are you mostly seeing? So you're saying that you see like a diverse group, not, or no, like you guys are seeing, young people, old people, black, white, like what's the demographics of what you're seeing when you're going to these protests?
The demographics I saw were all across the board, to be completely honest. At nighttime, it's very clearly like much younger people, like the like millennials and like just like older generations are definitely not out past like 7 p.m. Or 8 when it starts getting dark. But during the day, you see like 70-year-old white people out with their signs and t-shirts and everything. You see younger people. I see a lot of kids also, which is great because I took my sister to a protest as well, and she was 12. She's 13 now. And I just wanted to expose her to it and like show her how she can be a part of history and just to give her that experience. But I seriously see all demographics, all races, all ages. Yeah, it's really not discriminatory in terms of protesting.
Yeah, and I could say I saw the exact same thing in Raleigh, in North Carolina. It was all different people from all different walks of life coming out, in solidarity and marching with us. So
Yeah.
it's not limited to any one group of people.
No, it's not. And that's a good thing. I think that is good that we're saying like a whole collection of people here. But the thing is, when I'm seeing a lot of people that are not black protesting, but at the same time, I'm getting a little worried when I see things on the news like with Kyle Rittenhouse, who's a white boy from our generation. He's 17. He's not that much, younger than us. And also Dylan Roof, this happened in the past week. He shot up a church in the South, I believe. Does this make you worry about white people from our generation? Because a lot of people have this notion that, we're the most liberal generation.
This is something odd I'm about to say. I talk about this with I'm not going to name drop my friends, but there's 2 other black women that went to Burt. Mm-hmm. But we're like, our generation, like us, our like age group of people like 18 plus, we're pretty progressive. But the TikTok generation that's considered a part of our generation that's like right below us, they're low-key regressing. Like, no cap, they're low-key regressing because they have a lot of the sensationalizing of like black grief and black pain and just everything that's going on. I see a lot of it on TikTok, if anything, or just like having TikTok dances, like white TikTok dances, like while people are protesting. You know, it's a lot of it is on TikTok, and I feel like that group of people, they're like commodifying. I've even heard like Black kids that are still at BERT, and obviously you should make jokes during this time because like we don't all want to like be mad all the time, but like I've seen them make jokes about like slavery and, you know, like, oh, this is what my ancestors were doing on the plantation. And not that you can't make those jokes sometimes like in our own thing, like kiki in our own time, but like that encourages your white friends to do that too, and it's just like, oh, I don't know if that's good. I'm not surprised to see a 17-year-old white boy come and shoot up a protest, you know?
Right.
Like TikTok kind of enables that. Not to say like, let's get rid of TikTok, but like, yeah.
For white teenagers, this is a question for everyone too, not just the Black teens. For white teenagers and young adults, like what's the best way that one can help? Because I know that there are some, you know, white people that generally just want to help, and they sometimes they might feel scared because they might feel like they won't be perceived like a white savior. So what's the best way for them to contribute, you know, to this movement and for them to provide good help?
The first thing you need to do is listen, and actually listen. Like, you don't give a response, you listen and you understand, because your advice probably isn't going to help. As a white person to a Black person, it's not going to help. So listening is the first thing you need to do, and that's probably the only reason they're giving you their words and their experiences, because that's what they want.
I would say also to amplify those voices, to sit back and listen and amplify the ones that should be talking and have experience talking about these things.
Yeah.
I mean, and just spend money, pay. Like, there's no harm in sitting back on the side and Venmoing people, you know? Like, I mean, don't be completely on the side. Don't only just spend money. Like, rich people can easily just spend money and feel like they've accomplished something. But, you know, do what you can do. I'd say do what feels like a burden to you almost. Like, do something until it begins to hurt a little. Because if you're doing something comfortably, like what actually, like, it needs to be a certain amount of what you can give. You know, you need to give more than what is easy to give, because that's not what's going to help, bottom line.
I think tying on to the point about like listening is also not putting it on your Black friends to educate you on like the issues, and that we have so many resources available as well that like we shouldn't force our friends to like relive trauma and like educate us when we can. There's so many resources that we can look for ourselves to educate ourselves, and then once kind of we have that education and we are very knowledgeable on this, then we can, I think, really go for the actions that are and uplift other voices as well. And so like that goes into the idea of like protesting, but protesting like responsibly in a way that isn't performative. It goes to like uplifting and through social media, but doing it in a way that isn't performative. And then like there's a way for every single person to help and get involved in some way, but like the first step is always listening and then educating yourself.
Do you guys feel different when you're discussing these issues with like your parents or people that are older? I know that like, you know, me being Black and talking to my parents, they were teenagers once too, and they worry. In fact, I was driving the other day around just because, you know, it's quarantine and, you know, we all get bored and we don't want to be stuck in the house. So I was driving around and then the news about Jacob Blake comes on. I was driving and I put on the radio. And I get a text from my mom and she says, "Where are you? Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just driving around in my car, sightseeing all over the place in DC." And she says, "Okay, but be careful." I'm not a Black parent, but I know for a fact that my parents were worried sick when I was driving around, especially late at night. Um, I don't know how it feels to be a Black person. I don't have a kid yet. But how you guys feel with your families, you know, during these times about these issues? Do you feel like your parents have this kind of worried feeling for you guys when you're out and about, you know, doing your thing, even protesting? I know that parents can get worried about their kids when they're going out.
So during protesting, it's taken a very long time for my mom to get used to it. Like, she still gets super worried now, and that's valid, but it took her a while.
When we're there together, that's for sure.
Yeah, but it took
sharing locations is A1 for her.
And it took a while for her to understand exactly why I wanted to go every day and not take a break, because she was like, "You should get some rest, you should blah blah blah." But
Right.
I think now she really understands that it's like it's not something I could just, we could just like stop. It's like she does get very worried though, and
I get it.
Yeah.
I fully understand. Like, of course she's worried. We're at a protest. There's cops everywhere. We're in downtown DC.
And it's not like she doesn't trust us specifically. She doesn't trust the police, and she doesn't trust the people around us who could have bad intentions in mind.
But do you guys think that this situation is going to get worse over the next course of months? Because we were seeing these situations back to back. Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Jacob Blake, back to back all the time. So you think we're going to be seeing more cases after this? Or do you think that it's going to decline and possibly get better?
At least on TV, it'll probably, it does this thing where it goes away for a little bit because they don't want to talk about it anymore. And then if there's, I hate to be this way, but if there's a Black man that gets killed who's not a supposed criminal, then they put it on TV again. Because that's even when I was talking about them not talking about Black women or Black trans people or Black queer people, they also don't talk about Black men that are supposed criminals. Because while Jacob Blake was shot like 7 times, there was also a man in Louisiana who was killed by police when he was having a mental health crisis. And they didn't talk about him at all. Same thing when George Floyd was killed. I believe the man's name was Sean Reed, who was also killed by police in Ohio. And it was because he had a stolen car. They killed him, which is like still property over person. It's like, what are you doing? Right? So I don't think this is necessarily the worst. Like, obviously I've never dealt with a police killing personally before, so I can't speak from that, perspective. But like, I don't think this is the worst because this has been happening for a very long time at this magnitude, and it just doesn't get talked about either on social media or on the news. Because I remember, like, even before I went to Berk, there was a Black woman that was killed like right in front of the White House because she was speeding. She was a threat. They killed her and her infant was in the car. And you don't ever hear her name. So it's like, this stuff happens. Not that you should shrug about it, but like, it happens all the time. And I think when the election is over, depending on how it goes, they're either going to talk about it a lot or they're not going to talk about it at all,
Yeah, another thing, like, I think just as like a journalism major and having, studied that throughout my gap year, TV is all about views and ratings. So as long as, sending videos around of Black people getting shot is going to get them ratings and views, they're going to talk about it. They're going to make it the headline story. So if anything, it might just go up, the rate in which we receive this information, because it's a hot topic and we've become so desensitized to it. They can continue to put that on TV. Before, they didn't do that because it wasn't as easily accessible. Now we see videos of it, like I said a little far earlier in this, that they can show that on TV and it's really not a problem. So I feel like we're definitely most likely going to see more.
Do you feel optimistic at all for the future? Do you think that we're going to be seeing some real change?
Not until a whole lot changes, like all the systems go. And there's a lot of those. But prisons, police, educational systems, like hospitals, like things are so here everywhere. Like I just don't think things can change because of how immediately and after this, I guess, because of how ingrained it is within our society. It's just so present everywhere. And no amount of like awareness or insight into it is going to change that, just because people that benefit from this, like, this is capitalism. People make money from these systems, They don't want these to go away. They need these. They need these to keep their families rich. Like all this generational wealth, like, it just doesn't really seem possible for me right now, but I would hope so.
I'm cautiously optimistic, I think. I think what's really dependent is after November, no matter what the outcome is, we're going to need white people especially to stay in tune with what's happening and keep applying pressure. That's why it's great to see Brennan and Phil here. And we're also going to need to really expand the intersectionality and how we look at it, because like Kelsey was saying, we need to amplify Black trans and Black women, Black LGBT, all of that, and really incorporate them into this movement, because at sometimes they definitely feel outside it almost, because we aren't talking about their lives enough. And we can't focus too much on November. We're going to have to focus on making this, it could be a decade-long fight, and we have to be prepared to just dig our trench and stand our ground and not step back on any issue, not to compromise any issue. It's going to be social and economic, because right now you can have, there's a ton of Black police killings, but there's also Black killings out of pure negligence, out of a failing healthcare system and lack of economic safety net, leading people into criminality and leading people into the prison pipeline and arresting people for keeping people in prison for nonviolent drug offenses. All of those are Black issues, but all those are also American issues and issues that affect working class people extraordinarily high, at higher rates than they do affect the middle and upper classes. So this is a racial struggle, and this is a class struggle as well. And we need to not be distracted and sidelined by virtue signaling or any of that. We just need to keep our heels in the ground and fight.
The end goal is that like Black lives will someday truly matter to everyone in this country, and that's a long way off, because I think just on the issue of like environmental justice, like there are like studies that show that like white families produce most of the pollution, and then Black and Hispanic families are the ones that are having to breathe that pollution in. Like you can talk about climate justice, and as Thomas was mentioning very well, is like healthcare justice as well, and like things like not I think Black women are statistically less likely to receive painkillers when they're getting pain as opposed to white women, and that just goes to like racism and just our doctor not prescribing the right medication for the right instance because of race. And so like there are so many like biases in the system and racism in the system that like it takes so much work and so much conscious work to actually wipe it all out. And I think like that's a long way off, but like the way we do that is like keeping at it and keeping our focus and not letting our focus go just because the election's over.
Right. We can, go ahead.
I wanted to add to that, just like I don't want to say piggybacking, but going off of what everybody just said, it's also a matter of continuing to push for the progressive changes. I think in the past decades, we get one thing accomplished and we're like, oh my gosh, we did it. And then we forget that there's so much more that needs to happen. And I'm so like grateful that our generation are the ones that have pinpointed like every single system is rooted in racism and the oppression of Black people.
Yeah, you're spot on about that. I think that it is going to take a long time, but we all need to get into what John Lewis said, good trouble. I think that if we all get into good trouble, we're going to see some positive effects.
I think it's really dangerous for Black people and Indigenous people in particular to become pessimistic, because it can literally kill us, you know, like whether that be from a mental health standpoint or a physical health standpoint. Like I know how realistically it's not gonna change for a very long time, but like also like the impending like threat of like climate change and that, and also just like how slow things move in this like political system. It's very disheartening, but I think it's very important for us to learn how to cope with these things. And even though that it's like trash, we shouldn't have to like settle for these things, which we shouldn't. I think it's really important for Black people, Indigenous people, and all allies of those people to like uplift like you know, different things you can do for your mental health and physical health to keep you sane, you know? Because like everything that you guys were saying, especially with that healthcare stuff, like that killed my great grandmother last year, you know? And she was neglected because she was a Black woman, and they knew that something was going on with her, and they didn't tell her, and they didn't tell my family, and she ended up dying. And like that, it almost killed me because I was so stressed out about it. And then my dad got cancer at the same time, and then no one wanted to like give him surgery and stuff like that. They just kept pushing it off until coronavirus, and he was diagnosed last year. So it was just like, you know, like we are gonna face some pretty like terrible things, and it's just really important that this is why I think it's important to center liberation instead of racism, because if you center liberation, you also keep people alive and not just surviving but living, you know, because we deserve to live. even when things are horrible, we still deserve to live and be happy, you know? So yeah.
You're right. We all deserve justice. And guys, I want to thank you so much for coming on to this platform of mine and sharing your thoughts, your experiences, and all that you've gone through and all the help that you've done. Thank you so much for being here and for, sharing your truth, because we need more conversations like these. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Norman.
Illy.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you.
Incorporating our
Make
voices.
everyone smile. I want to take a picture. Okay, thanks.